welcome to another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me, as always, is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
Today, I am actually okay. I've been fighting a little bit what we affectionately call NAMM thrax for the better part of last week, but I'm kind of back to normal. So that's how I am.
Yay.
And I find that is probably a good introduction to this episode. But first time I actually got sick after NAMM. After all these years, never happened before, but I got a pretty gnarly cold, and I can only attribute it to that. So
Crazy.
On that long note, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I somehow escaped the NAMM thrax, which to me is a little strange, mainly because you and I were pretty much joined at the hip for most of it, like at least 95 or more % of it. I also escaped Sundance thrax. I don't know what they call it there, but I went to a party at Sundance and did not get ill there either. Somebody else I know did. And then you also announced that you got the NAMM thrax, and I'm kind of like, how did I escape all this? Because I was with both of these people fairly decent amount of time at both events.
I don't know. It's the only thing I can attribute it to because I'm rarely out with people. And this was one of those cases where you're surrounded by people all the time. So,
yes.
But anyway, I'm on the mend, so enough of that. How was your NAMM experience, Jody?
I'm going to say that it was slightly different than usual in that, being the podcasters that we are, we were invited to NAMM's media event, which happened the night before NAMM starts. I went to that, having never been to that before. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like a giant keynote speech that Apple might give. But instead of just being one company giving all that information, it was multiple companies that was supposed to last 90 minutes, but went closer to 2 hours. Mm-hmm. It was interesting. And they opened the whole show prior to those companies coming out and speaking with a guy who was playing what he calls his database.
Okay.
It was pretty cool. It's this guy he's a bass player. He's on social media. He plays a stand-up bass, and it is covered in LED lights and pads that light up. And he's got all of this running into a very complicated network of a foot pedal and computer. And it allows him to either create loops on the fly or make use of samples to play back pre-made sounds and loops while he plays his songs. And this guy is blowing up on social media because it's a fun watch, and he's actually really quite good, and he's super talented at making all of this stuff go.
It sounds, as you're describing it, I didn't see him obviously, but it sounds pretty chaotic, but was it cool?
Well, it's very musical, actually. It wasn't very chaotic at all. And when the
good,
samples
because that's what
played,
sounds like it could be like almost like a vehicle to show off the technology, if you will.
Right.
But it sounds like it wasn't.
He wasn't a vehicle to show off the technology, although all the times when little bits of pieces of audio would play, whether it was a kick drum or a snare, clap, or some other sonic piece of melody or something that went along with his bass lines and his singing, he also sang, they lit up, these little LED lights. And there's no rhyme or reason really to what they look like. It just almost looks like he was a 5-year-old creating a science project piece that says, if I press this button or it plays something back on my computer, it lights up kind of thing. It was nifty. And it's definitely a very nice gimmick, and it works very well for him. And he was pretty good music to start it all off. And he's also a nerd because he was nerding out about things in the room.
I don't think you develop that kind of instrument stuff without being a nerd. So
of course not.
Way for him. Good for him.
Yes.
Go him.
At that media event, of course, there was Fender, Marshall, Paul Reed Smith, other companies that are relatively large names in the industry that were making announcements of products. Oddly enough, several of these companies were making their announcements at this media event, which were immediately going out across the internet. So we feel like this podcast might be a little bit behind in that people already knew about it. I was texting some friends and saying, hey, this is what's coming up from Fender or so-and-so. And they're like, yeah, we just heard it. I was like, why am I here?
Yeah.
If you just heard it, why am I here?
I think that's one of the things with NAMM these days, though, because back in the day before all the news was so prevalent when it comes to releases and software and things, it was at NAMM you saw them displayed for the first time.
Sure.
Before there was really like a YouTube or basically people before they had broadband internet, right? So you mentioned a couple of companies there, and it's sort of very noticeable, I think, that larger companies don't really have a presence.
No, that's what I was going to say. They went missing from the actual show other than their announcement.
Right. So it's like, here's what we got. We're going to regurgitate all this stuff, and here's our new stuff, and thank you, that's it for us type of thing. You know, you used to go and you'd see like, oh, now Logic has automation on everything, right? Whenever that was introduced in 5 or whatever. But it's like, oh, that's really cool. Now it's just, you see that online, and they're generally good at announcing those things. I think for me, the most fun, at least that I had this time around, was, again, just like meeting all the people that you tend to meet just once every year, and it's like at NAMM. And of course, me getting to hang out with you for the better part of a few days, which is great.
Yes.
But that's the most fun part, I think. And my takeaway from this, there were a few things that I'll mention here in this episode. Not a whole lot that sort of hit me over the head, where it's like, oh, this is really cool.
Right.
You know, so it's like, okay, I might just be jaded or whatever it is. That was my impression, anyway, that I kind of took away from it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was anything super mind-blowing in my mind.
Yeah, not anything that I was like, wow, I got to tell everybody about this. There are a few things I thought were cool, but yeah.
Definitely some things that were kind of cool. Nothing mind-blowing, although I will say that I had heard about a product called the Brownie, which is by AmpRX, I believe is the name of the company. And they create what is known as a line conditioner in old school speak of what it does. It's a power conditioner for your amps in that it keeps power at a consistent voltage, and you can dial that in a range. It's not a massive range like a Variax would be, but it is similar to a Variax. And it's designed specifically for guitar amps and bass amps, whether they're vintage or modern, so that they can get the exact voltage that the manufacturer intended, so that you know that that's what that amp is going to sound like. And they have this new one called the Brownie, which is a single amp line conditioner. They have other versions that are much more expensive and can do many more amps. Their biggest one can do 8 amp heads at once, which is quite a few if you're collecting a lot of amp heads and you need them to be running at an ideal voltage.
Yeah, or if you're playing live and you're bringing all your amps with you, and the voltage in the building that you're playing or the venue might be a little suspect, you know what I mean? So make sure that your amps are getting the feed that they require. I guess that's kind of cool. Not to cut you off here, but when it comes to, I mean, we're both essentially guitar players, right? That's what we started our journey with. There were a couple of things that were cool with guitar. So many companies seem to want to like reinvent the wheel when it comes to guitar these days.
There are quite a few that look like they were trying to reinvent a wheel. And I'm sure you're going to bring one up in a moment here that we've thought, well, that's nifty, but very impractical.
Yeah, I don't want to mention the company's name, but yeah, it was an idea where it's like, I don't see this happening. But some of these companies have the engineering aspect and things is interesting, at least, right?
Phenomenal.
Like, right. But in my impression, it's trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
Yes, I agree with that.
And that is, of course, that's you could say that's true for plugins and things as well today. Though, hey, have you ever had problems with this? No, not really. Well, here's a plugin for that. You know?
Right.
But you mentioned the sort of pre-NAMM announcements there, and you had mentioned something that is still sort of like mind-blowing from Martin.
Yes.
They just announced, was it the 3 millionth or the 30 millionth?
It was their 3 millionth guitar that they have made, and it was on display at NAMM, but they announced it at the media event.
Right.
And they've not only made this 3 millionth guitar to be something of astronomical value, they created some recreations of that 3 millionth guitar in that they're inspired by, and then they announced it and said, each one of these is going to be $300,000. And it's like, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that saw that. And it's not to knock Martin, because Martin, obviously, like, you know, one of the higher ends of acoustic guitars. But I found it funny again, this is just my personality, right? But when I saw that guitar that was on display, and it's this amazing value, to me, it looks like a piece of furniture. That was it not what it is? And somebody go, hey, you want to buy this guitar? I'm like, no, that's not something that I would want or even play. But that has more to do with me, and I'm not in their target demographic like at all. It's interesting. But there are other guitars that we saw. They're one of a kind, and here's an acoustic guitar, and it's the lower end of their scale, and it's like $25,000. It's like, who is this marketed for? But interesting. Again, but with guitar, all of these things, they're just kind of like, how do you reinvent something, you know?
There was another acoustic guitar that I believe I had told you we needed to look at.
Oh yeah, the Yamaha thing, yeah?
Yes, the Tag 3, I believe it's called. It's an acoustic guitar that has a built-in looping ability, built-in chorusing ability, and built-in delay ability. And they had an artist come up that night at the media event and play it and show it off. And it was impressive, to say the least. And then we went to the Yamaha booth and checked it out. And it was equally as impressive, even though you're listening to a gigantic amount of cacophonic noise there. You could still hear what it could do.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. I thought it sounded cool. I mean, even if you just bypassed the looping aspects of it and just use some of the, effects, onboard effects, if you will, it sounded great. I mean, you're that type of performer, that was really cool. You just bring your guitar and there you go, right?
Exactly. And the chorusing sounded really good. And it sounds really good not even being mic'd up. It wasn't plugged in. They were using a microphone because it turns the whole guitar into the effect, essentially. And I believe there's some sort of speaker mounted in there somehow that creates the delay effect and other things. If you create a loop, you can record a loop as well, where you don't have to tell it where the start point is. You just start playing and it knows automatically, which was also impressive because she did it multiple times where she had it set up and then zing, hits the strings and it automatically knew where it was. And then she hits the loop point and it automatically looped. It was pretty cool. It's impressive technology. And the guitar in and of itself was really not that expensive. It was affordable for what you're getting.
Yeah, I remember. And it also, one of those things that I have small hands, right? So when I play acoustic guitars, it's sometimes a struggle for me. But it was comfortable. It was comfortable to play. So maybe somebody like you would actually struggle because it's not human-sized hands, But right. No, it was a cool piece of gear. And that brings me to another point that I wanted to bring up, that it was kind of unfortunate if you're me. I just have this feeling right now that I want to get a new nylon string guitar. I rarely play nylon string, right? But it's like, you know what? I kind of want another one. I want a nice one. Out of sheer ignorance, I didn't realize that when we were at the Taylor booth,
yes,
that they actually make nylon string guitars. I had no idea. So it goes to show what I know, right? Mm-hmm. But I picked one up, and you know how they have their tiers, if you will, like their lower tiers, like the 100 series or whatever it goes up. And there was one, and it was like a 200 series. I'm like, oh, it can't be too bad. And I played it, and it played freaking great. It sounded awesome. It felt great. And it was just way out of my price range what I would be willing to play for an acoustic guitar, or at least to justify the purchase. So that was really disappointing. The Taylor nylon strings played great and it sounded great. So,
which is par for the course with Taylor. They make acoustic guitars that play like as easy as an electric guitar.
Yeah. It felt really, really good. And it's one of those things when you don't play nylon as much, like me, for example, when you play one, it's like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. And it was one of those things that I'm still thinking about that damn guitar. So,
so you know you're going to get one.
I can't justify it. I could get it, but it's I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe at some point I'll get something. But
so outside of the guitar arena of things and the people that we saw and spoke to in the guitar area of NAMM, what are some of the other highlights of things you've seen?
There were a few things that sort of leapt out at me that I thought was kind of cool. I'm not a drummer, but we were at the Roland booth, and DW drums are now under that umbrella. They have a new shell that it's like in prototype or one of the concepts where they have a sheet of aluminum inside the wooden shell. The idea would be that it forces the wood to resonate longer and therefore carrying more tone, I guess, is the idea. We heard it being played there by, I want to say, wasn't Peter Erskine, was it? But it was one of those like classic session player drummers that performed with it. Of course, when they play, anything is going to sound good. A set of buckets is going to sound awesome, right? But it sounded great, and I thought that was like, okay, well, that's something a little different. Will that become something? I don't know. But that was the first thing that I felt was like, oh, that's kind of something new that might be a benefit, but we'll see. But I thought that was cool. But what about you? What was the first thing that came to you?
In that same booth, which was the Roland booth.
Yeah.
I don't know how new this is, but because they own DW, they have the only licensed, officially named DW samples that are available to be used at Rolling Cloud. And so that's pretty cool to me. DWs are an iconic sound. In addition to that, didn't they also announce Slingerland is coming back? They're bringing back the Slingerland line, which is also cool.
That sounds familiar, so that might be right. I would need to double check that. Let's run with it. Yeah, they're bringing it back. So Roland, get on that.
Yeah. The idea there, though, is that with the plethora of drum plugins that you can get for use with, say, things like electronic kits, having something that plays as well as the brand new V-drum kits and how fluid and well tracking they seem to be, to have also the ability to have these DW sounds is pretty impressive. And even if you don't have a V-drum kit and you're just programming drums, now you can get some fantastic DW sounds straight from Roland using Rolling Cloud.
Yeah, see, that's something that for me doesn't hit me as hard because all of those drums have been meticulously sampled by TuneTrack and all of these companies, right? So it's not like, they've never been available before. But if you're a Rolling Cloud user, I guess this would be kind of a cool thing to access those samples without using something like Superior Drummer or something.
Sure.
Where you might just want to do that. But that's kind of interesting. Another thing, and kind of switching gears here a little bit, when we were walking through there and we're talking to the SSL people, they have a new interface that I thought was kind of cool too, and that was the SSL 18.
Yes.
That if you're looking for a new interface now and you're looking at SSL, obviously they had the smaller ones, like the 2 and 4 channel ones that they've done. Mm-hmm. They're now growing that range and now having like digital expandability with those as well. So I thought that was kind of cool. I'm not necessarily in the market for a new interface right now, but to have a full 10-channel interface basically, plus the ADATs and all this kind of stuff. It would be cool if you're recording your drums or something, you might need a few more inputs. So that was kind of cool, I thought. That was like, hey, all right, that range is growing.
definitely growing, and it all works with that 360 thing that they're developing. You know it's going to have a much larger platform to grow on. In addition to that, they also are under the same umbrella with Harrison and their mix console that is digital. I don't know if I would go so far to call it a DAW, because they don't really call the Harrison mix bus a DAW. It's more of a mix platform, as that's what it's geared for. There's that whole SSL Harrison thing that's growing and looking very interesting going forward in the future.
Yeah, and of course, if you're into that, they're also, or the Slate Digital stuff is now under that
part of that umbrella as well.
Right? Yeah. So you have more plugins that you can shake a stick at. So.
Exactly. Along the lines of your interface thing, we did happen by the Audient booth.
Yes.
Which is under the Korg umbrella. I did not know. I don't know if that was the same as last year, because last year I believe Audient was on their own, and I guess in the past year they've been picked up as part of the Korg thing. And I was leaning over to look at this new interface that they were showing without talking to anybody, and I was trying to understand the outputs. And I was counting the outputs, and I was reading all the outputs to understand what it meant. And it was designed for Dolby Atmos mixing.
Right.
And all
somebody
the
I know that's been doing some of that lately, right?
Some of that, yes, just a little bit. They have enough outputs, and they're all labeled very specifically up to 916. So if you're doing any type of Atmos mixing, this interface is your best bet to getting a very easy to understand routing system out of your audio, whether it's your DAW and another interface. They're claiming this platform, which is called the Aurea, is designed specifically to be platform agnostic for Atmos mixing. It's labeled for Atmos mixing, but in talking to them, it should work easily as well for those that are getting into the Sony 360RA mixing. It won't be labeled the same because it's labeled for the Atmos stuff, but it has the same amount of outputs and the same concept to it. And it doesn't know whether you're actually doing Atmos or Sony 360RA or some other immersive type of audio thing. It looks very interesting. And being that it's from Audient, it will be an affordable piece of kit. And nicely enough, if you have something such as like you and I with the Apollo system, all you have to do is connect it via light pipe, and it will do all the outputs for you.
Yeah, that looked pretty good. I haven't stepped into that whole world with surround or Atmos or 360, obviously. You started to see a little bit more, at least maybe because I'm just in tune with it now. It's like you see a lot more gear sort of being pushed towards that direction, right?
Well, yeah.
So, yeah, that was cool. On an A side to that, our friend Dale Titus showed us their new box that they had.
Foot pedal.
Well, but it was the amp that they had, right? That now had like a digital interface when you can have all their virtual stomp boxes and control them through your iPad and have that just with one amp, essentially, with physical knobs on it that you can adjust for live use and things. And I'm not describing that very well, but take my word for it, it was pretty cool.
Yes, the interface was very interesting in light of a prototype box that I've made. It sounds like
it looked and behaved a lot what you imagined that you were going to be able to do or wanted to be able to do.
Sure. Yeah. And based on what Dale was trying not to say is there are some updates coming that may make it very similar to the thing that I had created, which would be good.
So, let's just leave it at that.
Just,
then, right?
Let's just leave it at that.
Don't betray his trust.
What's the next thing on your list?
Well, I have to mention an instrument that I'm helping to work on right now, my day-to-day job, and that's Sunset Choir by Realitone. Obviously, I've been working with it for a while. I know how cool it sounds. I got to show it off a little bit to you as well, and you got to play it. And I know people are sort of waiting for it, and it's taking a little bit of time. And
but it sounds glorious.
It does sound glorious, and it is really, really cool. So I just wanted to mention that if anybody's looking for a choir library, yeah, it's going to be great. It is deep, and not just in pitch, but what you're going to be able to do with it. It's really, really cool. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that.
So along the lines of the whole thing with a choir, there is another piece of software that we saw last year that was very impressive then, and they're making improvements to it now, but they've released a second piece of software that essentially works in conjunction with this, and that is Vocaflex and their other software that is coming. The
Synth V.
The Synth V, which allows you to pretty much in real time change the character of your voice.
Yeah, there was no pretty much around it. It was in real time.
Well, there's a slight it's a slight delay. It would be very difficult to have your headphones on listening to yourself being done. You're doing it in real time and you're manipulating the interface in real time and you hear the change happening as you do the manipulation. And they had the ability to turn a man into a female. Mm-hmm. And if you were also a man, there were 3 or 4 other male stylistic sounds like Spaniard.
Like different ethnicities and things like that, yeah. And it sounds like sort of slightly racist when you're describing it.
It does.
But when you hear it, it's like, oh, yeah, there's no other way of describing that, right? But that was cool. I mean, just the flexibility and sound design options that will allow you to do.
Oh, so yeah. Even if turn yourself into your own chorus,
right?
Of people.
Yeah. So it's like you could really mangle stuff with it and just go completely nuts, right? For more sound design-y and effects type of thing. But like you said, like if you are the only person stacking and you going for like this massive Queen sounding background vocal, right? To tweak your voice just ever so slightly a little bit in each instant would just make that sound bigger and fatter.
Oh, yeah.
All this kind of stuff. So that was pretty cool. And I don't remember, well, they didn't really say exactly how they're doing it, but how they're breaking those down and allowing it to do that. But that was pretty cool as well. That was one of those like, oh, wow, yeah, this actually works, you know?
And works quite well, too.
Absolutely. It did that, yeah. So that was really cool. One thing to sort of like wrap up the vocal thing here is I just wanted to give an extra shout out to the guys at Celemony that are there. I have a tendency to go and bug them when I'm there and ask questions, and it's really not the right avenue to ask for tech support or anything like that, but you have those guys with the big brains right there. And
it's hard not to ask.
Yeah, and every time I learn something new with Melodyne, and it's like, oh my God, you can do that? So it's more than just tuning vocals, folks. It's pretty impressive.
Well, and the hard not to ask thing, we stopped by the OEC sound booth as well.
Oh, yeah.
And posed a rather interesting question that was based more around taking mixes from stereo and going to Atmos or 360 RA or some other immersive thing. You could see, based on your feedback from what I mentioned, the gears in his head start to twist and turn.
Yeah. As soon as you post a question, I'd like to do XYZ, and you could just see that engineering brain just started going overdrive. And
so hopefully there will be something coming down the line from them that will help those of us who are doing the immersive stuff. To that end, is there anything else that was like a must-see from NAMM before we wrap this up?
I don't think there was necessarily anything like sort of must-see from me. Again, I want to reiterate that for me, it was like the best thing about NAMM is to get to hang out with your friends and people that you tend to see just that one time a year. Like we met Tariq and Steve Wimet, and I met a couple of my friends like Bjorn Englian, the bass player, and things. And we bump into each other once a year at NAMM, and that's really the fun thing. And you get to sort of nerd out for a little bit, and that was great.
Yep,
that was great. What about you? Anything you want to bring up?
There was one item that we saw in the basement area that's usually the location of where the most esoteric things tend to come to life.
Yes.
And that was where we saw one of those guitar thing, circle guitar, I think it was called, that had a motor with a thing underneath the strings that would automatically allow you to set rhythmic values to strumming. So if your ability to strum a guitar is shit, I guess you could program this guitar to do strumming patterns for you. It was interesting. But there was one called Dogpaw, which is sort of like an MPC with a much smaller and finer grid and bigger. And it's going into its startup phase where they're doing funding, like a GoFundMe type thing. It was interesting to see how the layout worked and how you could create bizarre melodies or rhythmic values with this, was it 9x9 or 11x11 set of pads that were highly programmable to do pretty much anything you wanted. And that thing was interesting. I played around with it for a minute. That was probably the one thing. It's not necessarily mind-blowing, but interesting enough that you'd want to play around with it for a minute and probably come up with something bizarre.
Yeah, and that's always a good thing, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. And if you're thinking of anything that was along the lines of Friday Finds, you just heard a whole episode of it.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do one.
Yeah, there you go.
While Chris and I were walking around, somebody saw me. I did notice that he was looking at me, and then we turned away and we were walking down the aisle going somewhere, and he was looking specifically at my badge, and he found you and I and was like, oh my God, you're the guys that do the podcast inside the recording studio. And it was like, yes, that is us. And oddly enough, with the way we were triangled out, I'm on your left-hand side in your ear, and Chris is on your right-hand side. To him, as he was talking to us, Chris was on his left-hand side and I was on his right-hand side. But he wanted to thank us for doing the podcast.
That was actually quite nice. So thank you. Sorry, but I don't... Will, was it? Okay.
Will was his name.
All right. Well, thank you, Will, for doing that. And it was good to see you. And thank you for coming up and with the kind words.
While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to insidetherecordingstudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on our email list to be eligible for any future giveaways, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this incredible podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at insidetherecordingstudio.com with the word NAMM 2025. That's a word and a number. And you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Everybody have a good one.